Hello everybody, welcome to jurycentral.com online classes for law exams. So today I will be discussing with you the legal current affairs of the month of June to July 2021. So in this video I will discuss with you only the important legal affairs of June and July of the present year. So let us start. The first one is Ministry of Cooperation, new ministry to strengthen cooperative movement. The Modi government announced a new Ministry of Cooperation for strengthening the cooperative movement in the country. So a new ministry has been announced and the name of the ministry is Ministry of Cooperation, and according to their press note, adding that it will deepen cooperatives as a true people-based movement reaching up to the grassroots. The ministry will work to streamline processes for ease of doing businesses. So this is their objective, to create this new ministry. The next one is Union of India versus Rajendra and Shah, and in this case the Supreme Court has annulled parts of cooperative amendment. So let us see. So this case law has been decided just yesterday. In a major boost for federalism, the Supreme Court on Tuesday struck down parts of a constitution amendment which shrank the exclusive authority of states over its cooperative societies. Part 9b, introduced in the Constitution through the 97th Amendment Act of 2012, dictated the terms for running cooperative societies. The provisions in the amendment passed by Parliament without getting them ratified by state legislatures. So this has been the main reason for the Supreme Court to struck down the Part 9b. Partially it has struck down Part 9b, which has been introduced by 97th Amendment Act, and it deals with cooperative societies, because the same has been passed without getting them ratified by state legislatures. As recorded by the Constitution, went to the extent of determining the number of directors a society should have, or their length of tenure, and even the necessary expertise. In a majority judgment authored by Justice Nariman, so let me tell you, this decision has been given by a 2:1 majority, and the majority judgment has been authored by Justice Nariman. It says the court held that cooperative society comes under the exclusive legislative power of state legislatures. The judgment may be significant in the background of fears voiced by the states whether the new Central Ministry of Cooperation would disempower them. Like I have already discussed with you, the new Ministry of Cooperation which has been created by this government, so this judgment can have a significant impact on the creation of that new ministry. Part 9b, which consists of Articles 243ZH to 243ZT, has significantly substantially impacted state legislatures' exclusive legislative power over its cooperative sector under Entry 32 of the state list. In fact, the court pointed out how Article 243ZI makes it clear that a state may only make law on the incorporation, regulation and winding up of a society subject to the provisions of Part 9b of this 97th Constitution Amendment. So by this amendment, it has been believed that the center has actually encroached the power of the state legislature to legislate on the matters of cooperative society, which is actually given in the state list. However, the court did not strike down the portions of Part 9b of the amendment concerning multi-state cooperative societies. So Part 9b actually has two parts. First deals with cooperative societies and the second deals with multi-cooperative societies, and the Supreme Court has struck down only the cooperative societies part but not the multi-cooperative societies. In his dissent, so the judge who dissented from the majority judgment is Justice K.M. Joseph, said the doctrine of severability would not operate to distinguish between single state cooperatives and MSCS. The judge said the entire Part 9b should be struck down on the ground of absence of ratification, because both the societies has been approved without ratification. So this is a reason why Justice K.M. Joseph dissented from the majority judgment, and it said that the entire part shall be struck down as a whole. So now we'll see what do we mean by doctrine of severability. The doctrine of severability is also known as the doctrine of separability. The word to the extent of the inconsistency or contravention makes it clear that when some of the provisions of a statute becomes unconstitutional on account of inconsistency with fundamental rights, only through the repugnant provision of the law in question shall be treated by the courts as void and not the whole statute. So this doctrine actually says that if a part of the statute actually becomes inconsistent with the fundamental rights, then only that part has to be separated and has to be treated as void but not the whole statute. Then the next case is Kishore Chandra Wang Khemcha versus Union of India. In this case, Supreme Court to decide constitutionality of Section 124 IPC. So a notice has been issued in the month of May. Let us see, but some observation has been made by the Honorable Chief Justice in this case in the month of July. I would discuss with you. The 3-judge bench of UU Lalit, Indira Banerjee and KM Joseph justices has issued notice in a plea seeking declaration of Section 124A IPC to as unconstitutional and void. The order came after senior advocate Colin Gonzalez submitted before the court that the decision of the court in Kedarnath versus State of Bihar requires consideration. So Kedarnath judgment is very important, as in this case the constitutionality of Section 124A IPC has been held. The writ petitions were jointly filed before the Supreme Court by 2 journalists. This is Kire Chandra Wang Khemcha and Kanhaiya Lal Shukla from Manipur and Chhattisgarh respectively. The 2 journalists prayed for an appropriate writ of direction declaring Section 124A to be unconstitutional and void. So what the petition says, it says that it clearly infringes the fundamental right under Article 19 Clause 1 Subclause A of the Constitution of India, which guarantees that all citizens have the right to freedom of speech and expression. So in this petition, it has been pleaded that this section, the sedition section, is actually contrary to Article 19(1)A, which is a fundamental right. What is sedition? Now let us understand. Section 124A of IPC deals with sedition. It says, whoever by words either spoken or written or by sign or by visible representation or otherwise brings or attempts to bring into hatred or contempt or excites or attempts to excite disaffection towards the government established by law in India shall be punished with imprisonment for life, or to which fine may be added, or with imprisonment which may extend to 3 years, to which fine may be added, or with both. So the punishment prescribed is imprisonment for life. This is the maximum imprisonment under sedition. The section corresponding to Section 124A was originally Section 113 of Macaulay's Draft Penal Code of 1837 to 39, but the section was omitted from the Indian Penal Code as it was enacted in 1860. The reason for the omission from the code was enacted, it is not clear, but perhaps the legislative body didn't feel sure about its authority to enact such a provision in the code. Be that as it may, Section 124A was not placed on the statute book until 1870. So, when the IPC Act was framed, at that time the sedition law was omitted, but after 1860, that means in the year of 1870, the sedition law has been inserted again. Then what is Kedarnath's judgment? This is important. The 5-judge bench held that the Section 124A was constitutionally valid as it strikes the correct balance between the individual freedom rights and the interest of public order. So what the court said, it said the explanation appended to the main body of the section make it clear that criticism of public measures or government action, however strongly worded, would be within reasonable limits and would be consistent with the fundamental right of freedom of speech and expression. It is only when the words written or spoken etc. which have the pernicious tendency or intention of creating public disorder or disturbance of law. So this one is important. It is only if the words actually signify or it actually tends to create any public disorder or disturbance of law, and it has the intention embedded in it that the law steps in to prevent such activities in the interest of public order. So this is a reason why Section 124A has been held constitutionally valid, and it is actually to contain the disturbance which will be created against the government, the settled government, and it can also help in contain the public disorder. The CJ's criticism of sedition law. Chief Justice of India N.V. Ramana, in what may be an unprecedented judicial criticism of the way the sedition law is used by the government to crush liberties, asked why a colonial law against Mahatma Gandhi and Bal Gangadhar Tilak continued to serve in the law book 75 years after independence. So actually, the Chief Justice of India has dissented to the sedition law and has actually asked the government, like, why this law is still surviving even after this law has been inserted by the colonial republic, and also it is used against Mahatma Gandhi and Bal Gangadhar Tilak. Sedition is a colonial law, it suppresses freedoms, it was used against Mahatma Gandhi Tilak. Is this law necessary after 75 years of independence? The CJI said the sedition law, section 124 of the Indian Penal Code, was prone to misuse by the government. So even the Chief Justice has also admitted that this section has been misused by the government. The use of sedition is like a saw to the carpenter to cut a piece of wood, and he uses it to cut the entire forest itself. Then the next case is Vinod Dua versus Union of India, and it has been decided on 3rd of June 2021. Upholding the citizens' right to criticize the government, the bench of UU Lalit and Virit Saran justices has quashed the FIR lodged against journalist Vinod Dua over his YouTube show on communal riots in Delhi earlier this year. What the court held, let's see. A citizen has a right to criticize or comment upon the measures undertaken by the government and its functionaries, so long as he doesn't incite people to violence against the government established by law or with the intention of creating public disorder. So a statement is not sedition unless it incites people to violence and it has been made with the intention of creating public disorder, and it is only when the words or expressions have pernicious tendency and intention of creating public disorder or disturbance of law. So the words has to be with the intention of creating any public disorder or disturbance of law, and order that sections 124A and 505 of IPC must step in. What was the conspiracy? Let us read. So, according to the complaint, Dua had accused Prime Minister Narendra Modi of using deaths and terror attacks to get votes. This is the para of the FIR. It says, on 30th of March 2020, Mr. Vinod Dua in his show, namely the Vinod Dua show on YouTube, has made unfounded and bizarre allegations. Details of particular moments are provided below by stating following facts. At 5 minutes and 9 seconds of the video, he has stated that Narendra Modi has used deaths and terror attacks to garner votes. At 5 minutes and 45 seconds of the video, he claims that the government doesn't have enough testing facilities and has made false statements about the availability of the personal protective kits, and has stated that there is no sufficient information on those. Further, he also went on to state that ventilators and sanitizer exports were stopped only on 24th March 2020. So this is the allegation which has been made in the FIR, and it actually says that Mr. Dua has actually accused the Prime Minister of deaths and terror attacks to get votes. So why no case of sedition was made out against Dua? Deaths and terror attacks, let us see. The statement attributed to Dua that the Prime Minister had used deaths and terror attacks to garner votes, or that the Prime Minister had garnered votes through acts of terrorism, were not made in the talk show. That's what the Supreme Court said, that these words, although it is mentioned in the FIR, but those words are not said by Mr. Dua in his YouTube show. No such assertion finds place in the true translation, or any objection raised that the translation version was anyway incorrect. The petitioner did say that the airstrikes by India on Balakot and attacks on Pathankot and Pulwama were used as political events to garner votes, but no allegations were made against the Prime Minister as was stated in the FIR. So that's what the Supreme Court observed, that no allegation has been made against the Prime Minister as it is alleged in the FIR. Second, COVID-19 testing facilities. Considering the size of the population of this country, the testing facilities to gauge and check the spread and effect of the pandemic, at least in the initial stages of the surge, were not exactly adequate. That's what we all understand, and even Supreme Court also understood this point. Even if in that light the petitioner made any comments about testing facilities or PPE suits, N95 mask and mask apply, those comments in first two statement cannot be anything other than appraisal of the situation then obtaining. So he has actually made this statement in a in its truest sense. It has only made an appraisal of the current situation. Then next one is migrant workers. As on 30th of March 2020, migrant workers in huge numbers were moving towards their hometowns, villages. In these circumstances, there would naturally be some apprehension about the shelter and food to be provided to them en route. It cannot be said that the petitioner was spreading any false information or rumor that was true. Like we all have seen the migrant crisis, in which the migrant workers were forced to walk back home on their foot, and it was also seen that there was no shelter and food are provided to the migrant workers while they're walking back home. So there was actually no shelter, and food is like a scanty food were provided to them. It is not the case of the respondents that migrant workers started moving towards their hometowns, villages purely as a result of the statements made by the petitioner. Such movement of migrant workers had begun long before. So the Supreme Court has actually said that the statement has been made after the migrant workers started moving towards their hometowns, but it is not like that after the journalist made that statement, the migrant workers out of that influence started walking back to their home. According to the court, only such activities which would be intended or have a tendency to create disorder or disturbance of public peace by resort to violence are rendered penal, like I already told you. So what the Supreme Court said at its conclusion, can at best be termed as expression of disapprobation, that means disapproval of actions of the government and its functionaries, so that prevailing situation could be addressed quickly and efficiently. So he has actually expressed his disapproval to the work of the government in containing the present situation, and he made this statement so that these issues could be addressed quickly and efficiently. They were certainly not made with intent to incite people or show tendency to create disorder or disturbance of public peace. So these ingredients are missing in his statement, like inciting people, or he made this statement with the intention to create any public disorder or disturbance of public peace, or by resort to violence. The next case is in a alarming newspaper report regarding Kawad Yatra in state of UP. UP can't proceed with Kawad Yatra amid pandemic, says Supreme Court in this case. The Supreme Court disagreed with the Uttar Pradesh government's proposal to conduct a symbolic Kawad Yatra amid the pandemic for compelling religious reasons, saying this is important. The fundamental rights of citizens across faiths and their right to life trumped religious sentiments. So there is a reason why the Supreme Court has expressed its dissent over UP's conduct of Kawad Yatra, and it said that fundamental rights of citizens across faiths and their right to life trumped religious sentiment. That means it is actually above the religious sentiments. A bench of Justices Rohinton F. Nariman and B.R. Gawai gave the state time till July 19 to rethink its proposal and file an affidavit. If it did not change its plans, Justice Nariman said the court will deliver whatever we have to deliver. So, in this, an affidavit was filed by the center late in the Supreme Court. After speed reading the affidavit, Justice Nariman announced preemptorily, state of Uttar Pradesh cannot go with this 100%. So, it's like Supreme Court has actually stayed the Kawad Yatra. Then the next case is in a delay in release of convicts after grant of bail. Bail orders will be sent instantly to jail authorities, Supreme Court. Chief Justice of India N.V. Ramana said people given bail by courts, even by the Supreme Court, have to wait for days before prison authorities release them. It is too much, he said. That is very true. Like generally, if an accused has been granted bail, the jail authorities do not release that person until they get the physical copy of the bail order. So as a solution, the Chief Justice, flanked by Justices L. Nageshwara Rao and A.S. Bopanna, announced in open court the rolling out of a new scheme. So to tackle with this situation, Supreme Court has rolled out a new scheme called Fast and Secure Transmission of Electronic Records, by which the Supreme Court would instantly, directly, securely and electronically transmit bail and other orders to jail authorities, district courts and high courts. So by this scheme, as the Supreme Court has rolled out this scheme by which it will transmit the bail order instantly to jail authorities, district courts and high courts. Attorney General K.K. Venugopal appreciated the court's initiative. So this is actually this is a suo motu petition, and this decision has been taken by the Supreme Court after taking this situation, like Pinjara Tour activist Devangana Kalita and Natasha Narwal and Jamia Millia student Asif Iqbal Tanha walked out of Tihar jail nearly 2 days after the Delhi High Court granted them bail. So for this reason, although they were granted bail, but they were released after 2 days. PM's new inauguration in Gujarat. So let us see. Prime Minister Narendra Modi virtually inaugurated the redeveloped railway station in Gujarat's capital Gandhinagar and 5-star hotel above it. And another project that Mr. Modi inaugurated via video link was a redeveloped Vadnagar railway station, which is actually situated in his hometown in North Gujarat. And apart from that, Prime Minister also inaugurated a nature park and aquatic gallery and a robotic gallery at the Science City. The next case is People's Union for Civil Liberties versus Union of India. This one is very important because in this the Supreme Court issues notice to the center on rampant invocation of Section 66A of IT Act, says continuous FIR under unconstitutional provision. Terrible and shocking. So all of you know in the Shreya Singh's judgment in 2015, in which the Supreme Court was pleased to struck down Section 66A of IT Act, but even after the striking of that act, the people are still booked under this act. So the issue was actually taken by the NGO called PUCL. So let us see. The Supreme Court on Monday issued a notice to the center on the issue of Section 66A of the IT Act that was scrapped several years ago, and said that it is shocking that the judgment striking down the law has not been implemented even now. Even though the judgment has struck down the law but has not been implemented till now, the notice came during the hearing of a plea filed by PUCL that pointed out that even after 7 years of the law being struck down, as of March 2021, a total of 745 cases are still pending and active before the district courts in 11 states, wherein the accused persons are being prosecuted for offences under Section 66A of IT Act. So the PUCL has pointed out that even after this striking of that act, 745 cases are pending in the district court in 11 states. The plea based on data collected by the Internet Freedom Foundation, which has been tracking cases under the zombie provisions which have been declared invalid but are still being used by police to prosecute people. It shows that even after March 2015, after the Shreya Singhal judgment which struck down Section 66A, 1307 cases were registered under the law. So till now, a total number of 1307 cases are lodged under this case. And answering to the question, Attorney General of India says that informed the Supreme Court that the statute book still carries Section 66A of the IT Act, which was struck down as unconstitutional. If your lordship see the IT Act book, there is only a small asterisk and a footnote that says deleted by order of Supreme Court. No one reads the footnote. So this is the irony, because generally like we have seen the Baird Act, in which although the the section has been struck down, so a footnote is attached that this section has been struck down, but the para of the section is given in the book. So nobody reads a footnote. That's what the Attorney General says, and these are reason why there are a number of rising of cases. Section 66A of the IT Act was used to punish online communication which is considered grossly offensive, menacing, or to send communication which the sender knows to be false or cause annoyance, inconvenience, danger, obstruction, insult, injury, criminal intimidation, enmity, hatred, or ill will. The provision was struck down by the Supreme Court on 24th March 2015 in Shreya Singhal's case. So now we will understand the Pegasus row. So this Pegasus, the issue of Pegasus, and many of you must be thinking that what is Pegasus and why it is doing much rounds in the media. And it is also believed that this row is about the hacking of the mobile devices and the personal information of influential people in the world. So we will understand this. The Pegasus project, an investigation by an international media consortium, has revealed that more than 50,000 phone numbers were targeted by a spyware created by NSO Group. So Pegasus is nothing but it's a project, and it is an investigation by an international media consortium which has revealed that more than 50,000 phone numbers were targeted by a spyware created by NSO Group, an Israeli software company. On the list were 300 verified phone numbers in India. So this spyware has been used to hack the verified phone numbers of 300 people, 300 influential people in India, including those of ministers, opposition leaders, and sitting judge. Sitting judge means this is actually talking about a former Supreme Court Chief Justice of India, more than 40 journalists and several activists and business person. It said the Indian government used it to spy on around 300 people between 2017 and 2019. What is it? Let us understand. A spyware is any malicious software designed to enter your computer device, gather your data and forward it to a third party without your consent. Pegasus, developed by NSO Group, is perhaps the most powerful spyware ever created. It is designed to infiltrate smartphones, Android and iOS, and turn them into surveillance devices. So this Pegasus, software, this spyware is actually developed by NSO Group, and it is actually the most powerful spyware, as it can even infiltrate your smartphone, Android, iOS, and turn them into surveillance devices. The Israeli company, so NSO Group is actually owned by an Israeli company, however market it as a tool to track criminals and terrorists. So this software, this spyware called Pegasus, has been developed by an Israeli company called NSO Group, and it is actually used for having surveillance on the personal devices like mobile phones. And Israeli company, however, market is as a tool to track criminals and terrorists for targeting, spying, and not mass surveillance. That's what the company says. NSO Group tells software to governments only. So this software is actually only available to the governments of any state, and it actually cost about rupees 70 lakh. How does it work? So we'll understand now. Pegasus exploits undiscovered vulnerabilities or bugs in Android and iOS. This means a phone could be infected even if it has the latest security patch installed. So suppose if your phone has any security to to save it from the attack of any malware or spyware, Pegasus can also breach that security patch installed in your phone. A previous version of the spyware from 2016 infected smartphones using a technique called spear phishing. So this was actually a technique used in the year of 2016. Text messages or emails containing a malicious link were sent to the target. So like earlier what it used to be done under this spyware is like they'll send you one link through text message or emails, and if a person once click to that link, his phone will be hacked. But it is not the case right now. By 2019, Pegasus could infiltrate a device with a missed call on WhatsApp and could even delete the record of this missed call, making it impossible for the user to know they had been targeted. In May that year, WhatsApp said Pegasus had exploited a bug in its code to infect more than 1,400 Android phones and iPhones this way, including those of government officials, journalists, and human rights activities. It soon fixed the bug. So by 2019, Pegasus has become so strong that even by a missed call on WhatsApp, it could infiltrate your phone, and this software was so powerful that it can even delete the record of the missed call given by that person who wants to infiltrate your phone. Surveillance law in India. Now we'll understand. Currently, the laws authorizing interception and monitoring of communications are Section 92 of CRPC for call record, etc. Rule 419 of the Telegraph rules and the rules under Sections 69 and 69B of the IT Act. Indeed, it is unclear when the Telegraph Act applies and when the IT Act applies. So, Telegraph Act and IT Act are actually applied vice versa. A limited number of agencies are provided powers to intercept and monitor. Now we'll understand. So Section 69, what it actually deals with. So it is actually power to issue directions for interception or monitoring of decryption of any information through any computer source. So this is Section 69 of IT Act, and under this the central government has the power to issue directions for interception or monitoring or decryption of any information through any computer resource. Then who has the power to intercept? Now we'll understand. The central government has authorized 10 agencies to intercept communications. These are Intelligence Bureau, Narcotics Control Bureau, Enforcement Directorate, Central Board of Direct Taxes, Directorate of Revenue Intelligence, Central Bureau of Investigation, National Investigation Agency, Cabinet Secretariat, RAW, Directorate of Signal Intelligence for Service Areas of Jammu and Kashmir, Northeast and Assam only, and Commissioner of Police, Delhi. So these are the 10 agencies who are empowered to conduct the interception over any personal information of any person. So last we will deal with obituary, very important obituary. Actor Surekha Sikri, winner of 3 national awards, passes away. A strong pillar of meaningful cinema, actor Surekha Sikri passed away on Friday. She was 76 and she was a 3-time national award winner, and she was best known to be acted in the film called Tamas, Mammo and Badhayo. So this has been our session and I hope you all have liked it. Do not forget to give a like, share, subscribe to the channel. Till we meet the next time, thank you and have a nice day.